Hey guys, my name is Ryan, and welcome to Overwatch Central. After Lucio coming back into the meta after Mercy's drop-off, I decided it was a good opportunity to sit down with a Lucio main. Was a one-trick way back when, that is now the main support on the London Hurricane team, which is the academy team for London Spitfire. So today I'll be talking to FunnyAstro about how to play this hero, any tips he has, not only for playing him at the highest tier, but also playing him in ladder as well. Without further ado, let's get started. So we always start these videos with introductions, so if you could give a sort of brief introduction to sort of where you are currently, what you play, what team you play for, but also how you got there in the first place.
Hey guys, I'm FunnyAstro. I'm a Lucia main for British Hurricanes, the new London Spitfire Academy team.
And you predominantly play Lucio, and I think the interesting thing that I really wanted to speak to you particularly about this is Lucio's one of those heroes that's played a little bit different in the pro scene to ladder, but you were first and foremost a Lucio, in your own words, one trick that played a lot of ladder and got to the highest tiers with him.
Yeah, I used to play a lot of ladder. I'm currently top 10 in Europe, playing Lucio only.
And you have been for a few seasons as well. Is that how you got noticed in the first place?
Yeah, I got picked up from ladder onto smaller mixed teams, played in weekly tournaments, and eventually got noticed by British Hurricane.
So there's a lot of misconceptions with Lucio, and I feel that this is now a good opportunity to talk about him. The last video, Master Guide, that we did way back when was with DSP Stanky, and even his play methods were really unconventional and a bit controversial in a sense because it doesn't really help your team. So just first and foremost, why is it now a good time to be playing Lucio after the Mercy meta changes?
Lucio's super strong right now with the tank meta because you can have really impactful speed boosts if you're playing team comps like quad tank or triple tank Junkrat, stuff like that.
And I feel that Lucio as a hero is often overlooked as just been this, to be a good Lucio you need to kind of exist to an extent. Just to sort of go over to begin with, what is your role on Lucio as a team? We could talk about shot calling and all that stuff in a second, but mostly, like, what is it your job to do? What is your role within a team other than actually speed boosting people in and out? Because sometimes it can be really difficult to actually support your team as it.
You can generally help out your other support just by going towards them, peeling for them. Fighting off enemy flankers is always a good thing to be doing as well. I was just saying, other than speed boosting, killing enemy DPSs when they're out of position is really impactful.
How much communication do you have when playing Lucio? Because again, there's a big misconception, I suppose, that Lucios are the shot callers, the main communicative person within the team. Now, speaking to Reels, like he said to me that it wasn't necessarily Lucio's job to shot call on a team, and you somewhat agree with him, don't you?
Yeah, I think Lucio shouldn't always be shot calling for teams, especially in this meta. He sees just as much as everyone else does in the team, so anyone can take the shot calling role on.
And that's specifically the idea of not just calling out targets to dive, but looking at ult economy and stuff like that.
Yeah, everything like that.
You say there that Lucio doesn't have Lucio has just as much to do as everybody else. What do you mean by that? Because I can understand what you're trying to get at, but just to sort of clear it up for other people, I guess people often assume that Lucio doesn't have a lot to actually do on his team. So when you're playing Lucio, both in ladder and in obviously your scrims and games with London Hurricane, what are you doing? What is your day-to-day life as a Lucio player in a game?
Generally, I just try and take 1v1s with other people, and then calling-wise, the thing I pay attention to the most is ults and how to use ults, because using a sound barrier really effectively can win fights.
I know this is a big case for Zenyatta and more, but I certainly think that Lucio is one of those heroes, again, that kind of suffers from it. In the pro scene, at least, you need to get your ultimate as soon as possible, and have it as often as possible for engaging with your team, but mostly to stop a lot of ultimates that are coming in. When it comes to Lucio, how do you mostly try and get that ultimate quickly? Because I feel a lot of Lucio people that try, a lot of players that try and pick up Lucio, it takes like 2 or 3 minutes to build up a sound barrier because the aiming of the weapon's a little bit weird, the projectiles are a little bit odd, it's very difficult to heal or know when to heal. So when it comes to the mechanics of playing Lucio, how could you best give advice on how to aim and to get that ultimate as quick as possible?
Biggest thing about getting your ults is probably just playing around your team. If you're playing with tank comp, just standing inside of them, and when they start taking damage, just amping heal gives you so much ult charge. And another thing is always aiming for headshots, even against tanks. When you're just spamming down a choke or something, always aim for the headshots because it gets you so much more ult charge.
Another ability that I really want to highlight, other than the left clicks and the right clicks as well, is the amp it up ability. There's two main things that you can do to use it to engage, to amp it up. I feel a lot of people use it at the wrong time, so Kind of what advice can you give about that ability specifically?
Amping is probably the hardest ability to use perfectly because it's basically jump judgment. So I think when it comes to knowing when to amp, it's more about just playing the game a lot. And when you keep playing and keep playing, you'll eventually learn when you need to be amping. Is
that a lot of things to do with Lucio then? Because you played a lot of him to sort of climb up. Where did you place initially when you started playing Lucio, and how much Lucio playtime, I guess, did it take to actually like completely nail down this hero to the point that you were mostly comfortable with what you were doing? Because I feel a lot of people just think you can pick up and play him in a similar sense to Mercy, but even Mercy as well, you need to play them for a certain amount of time before you can really get the most out of them. People just assume that you can pick up and play him and do your job as a Lucio, and half the time that could be further from the truth.
So in Season 2, I originally placed in Plat, and then I played around 200 hours a season from then up until around Season 8. And slowly have been climbing up the ladder. In Season 2 I barely peaked top 500, and I've been hitting it more consistently and higher rank ever since.
And this is just predominantly as Lucio, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's around 200 hours per season on Lucio.
How much do you communicate in games, both in ladder and in like normal sort of competitive games that you have with your team?
In ladder, I don't tend to talk much, because if you're playing, say, 5 or 6 hours straight, then I find it kind of difficult just to be talking that whole time every game without tilting. But generally in scrims, I'll talk more, try and manage ults, and keep the team like on the same page as me.
What are the big mistakes that you see coming out of some Lucio players, both in lower tiers that want to try and play supports, but also the higher tiers as well?
Not knowing when to be aggressive is probably one of the biggest things. A lot of the lower level Lucio players always underestimate the amount of damage they can do. So they'll see a soldier on 100 health and start running away when it's quite easy to kill a low HP target.
Cool, and I guess we could have asked this before we're building up your ult charge with the weapon. I guess the main thing is this is why you don't see a lot of Zenyatta in the lower tiers as well, right? Where the Genji or Tracer dives on them, they don't have the mechanical skill to look after themselves in a lot of situations, or the game sets up and positioning to avoid that encounter to begin with. Like, when it comes to Lucio, you may have answered this before, but like how can you realistically aim with him? Because his projectiles feel like sort of wet flannels a lot of the time when you actually hit targets, so the impact isn't quite there, I suppose.
One useful thing is when you've got a flanker on you at close range, if you fire 2 shots from your left click and then boop at the same time, it will cancel the animation of your left click and boop the close range flanker into line with your normal shots, which can make it more reliable to do damage. It's quite complicated, yeah.
Is there a lot of complicated tech surrounding Lucio? Obviously, you have the DSP stanky stuff of riding up the walls, crazy stuff like that, but how, on a scale of 1 to 10, or compared to the other supports, how difficult is Lucio to play? Because he's fairly straightforward to pick up, but man, to get the most use out of him, it feels almost impossible a lot of the time. You could be sat there as Lucio and be like, I don't feel like I'm doing anything. My team are dying, literally stood next to me, and I feel like I can't help them.
I think Lucio is a very easy hero to be okay at, and it's very hard to be one of the top, because you need to be doing so many things at the same time, and you always need to know where to be.
And do you feel like there's a big problem there with how the community perceive Lucio? Because it used to be just, you have to play Lucio in your team all the time.
Yeah, I think the Sigma sort of comes from back on the old Lucio before he was reworked. Because he used to be able to stand like 30 meters away, put speed or heal, whatever his team needed, and you could basically AFK at the back and your team would always have the aura. You could just spam shots. And it didn't take much skill to be good at that. But then after the remote 10 meter range, it became a lot more high skill.
When you said like the biggest mistake you see is Lucio's not knowing when to be aggressive and when to sort of disengage, kind of raises a question. When do you be aggressive? When do you try and engage on the enemy? Like, what kind of telltale signs are you looking for?
One of the main things to look for when you're being aggressive is trying to find a split DPS or a DPS with no cooldowns up, or maybe a lonely enemy support. So if you see a Zen alone in their backline, you can always amp into speed for him, because his hitbox is fairly round, which is quite easy for Lucio to hit with projectile. So you should pretty much always win that 1v1.
Now, you are the first player that I've ever come across that has gone pro by one-tricking, essentially. Like, you kind of did this as well with Mercy, you told me, when we were at the event as well, that you had a one-trick Mercy account. How effective is it to one-trick a hero to learn them? Would you, to an extent, recommend it, or...?
I think when you're climbing on the ladder, one of the best ways to rank up is definitely one-tricking, because you're always going to know more than the counterpart on the enemy team. So say the Lucio has an enemy on the enemy team, is someone who likes to play Lucio and Zenyatta, but you're only ever playing Lucio in your comp games. You're always going to know what to do in more situations than they will.
I just sort of describe what you did with the Mercy stuff when the Mercy meta came through. Like just what you eventually ended up doing.
When the Mercy meta came out, I did play comp a lot less, but eventually I sort of just gave up and started playing Mercy on all my accounts, and I made a Mercy only account, which didn't go too well, but
you feel it was important to learn that hero at that level and
yeah,
really
if you're
go
one-tricking something, you want to try and make sure that it's in the meta when you're doing it, because otherwise you're going to annoy a lot of people in your comp games. It's going to be very hard to rank up, and you need to be flexible when the meta changes.
There are a lot of people that are looking at the Overwatch League, and more particularly contenders, but like there's very little information on how you get into the tier 2 scene altogether. So like as somebody, we have a lot of people that watch it quite young, that are very, very good sort of top 500 level. If you're like a 16 to 17 year old person or whatever in top 500 that really want to push for this, what in your way would be the best way to go about it?
I'd recommend, first of all, getting high rank on the ladder and making friends in high rank ladder. So once you've got enough friends who are high rank, you can make a team to sort of compete in these local tournaments, local events, weekly small tournaments, and things like this. Eventually, you're going to get noticed by someone higher up, and you're going to progress into higher teams.
What big sort of tips do you feel you really want to try and teach people when it comes to playing Lucio? Because like nobody really wants to focus on that hero, but if they did, what kind of tips would you give them?
Always in comp, one thing that I found useful was when I'm playing it all the time, always trying to go for duels against enemy players whenever you see the opportunity. Because every time you're dueling one more person, you're going to be learning how to fight against that hero. So say you're always going for 1v1s on Tracers, then you're going to eventually learn how to win the 1v1s against Tracers. There are some cool niche things that not many people know you can do with Lucio, that you'll probably generally pick up after a few hundred hours. Certain things such as when you see a Tracer going for a pulse bomb, you can actually predict it and use your sound barrier, and it will negate all of the damage. Same goes for Junkrat Tire, which can be really useful in this meta when people are using Grav combos with Grav Pulse Bomb or Grav Tire.
And I guess finally, actually, before we go, what's the state of the support meta looking like currently from the high tier games that you play, but also in contenders and stuff like that? You practicing for it, of course. Like, we're seeing a lot of Lucio back, of course, but like Moira, Zen, Mercy, what kind of heroes do people really want to be learning for supports, at least at this time?
Well, it's kind of hard to say right now with Sombra coming out on with the reduced cooldown on her hack in the next patch. So we might see a return of Sombra, but right now I think some of the strongest supports are definitely Moira. Lucio is one of the strongest in comp as well. And Anna, surprisingly, has come back into the meta with her Biotic Grenade, which is really useful for taking down these quad tank. I don't think there's anything else mechanically. It's mostly just down to playing the game, keep playing Lucio, making sure you know what to do in every scenario. And
well, you do that by learning, obviously. It seems like it's one of those things where it can be really difficult to know when and what to do. So I guess the best bit of advice is to just dive in and learn it as Lucio.
Yep. And you can always come to my stream to see what I do and try and learn, which is twitch.tv/FunnyAstro. I stream occasionally when I have time. Also, go and follow @Hurricane on Twitter for updates on our contenders team.
And that's it for this time. Thank you very much for watching. You can check out all of FunnyAstro's details in the description below. And thanks for watching. If you can think of any pros you want us to talk to about specific heroes, do let us know in the comments below. And until next time, take care. We'll see you then.